Welcome to Mysterious Goings On. We're going to get right to the show after these messages. This episode is brought to you by Spotify and Anchor, your source for the best in music, podcasts, and more. You can also be someone who helps bring more to your life with Mysterious Goings On by being a listener supporter. Please click on the link in our show notes and you will be offered 3 tiers for support. We have a 99-cent per month tier, $4.99 per month, and $9.99 per month. You can buy it with Google Pay or use with a credit card instead. This helps keep the show going. I could use your support if you really enjoy Mysterious Goings On, and lots of you have since 2016. We'd love to keep going, and some listener support like you would be very, very helpful to me in keeping the show moving right along there. So, as I always say, at the end of every show, keep reading, but also keep listening, and please consider supporting Mysterious Goings On. It's been said many times that it's a curse, an old Chinese curse. Don't know if it's true or not, that may you live in interesting times. Well, we certainly do live in interesting times in 21st century America, and many Americans may be asking themselves a lot of questions given our current political and social climate, including how do we survive amongst a fractured, divided nation? What happens if an extreme, rigid, corrupt government comes into being? How do we combat the dangers of a centralized power and power-hungry individuals? And finally, what happens when oil finally runs out and our energy grid is controlled by just one entity? Well, you're in luck because we have engineer and author Carl H. Mitchell with us today, who has imagined a dystopian world in his books that enlightens, informs, and of course, thankfully, entertains his readers. And we're going to talk to him today about his look into a not so distant future when the above questions get answered in a dramatic story. Carl H. Mitchell, good sir, welcome to Mysterious Goings On.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation.
It is certainly our pleasure to have you. You know, as I mentioned in the introduction about interesting times, I don't think it's a far leap to say that we are definitely living in interesting times, wouldn't you say?
Yes, definitely. And, I basically I'm working on a trilogy. 2 of them are out, and I outlined the whole structure of the trilogy back maybe in 2010, 2012, what have you. The first book was completed in 2016, and it did have a dictatorship, if you will, that created a dystopian environment, which dystopia is basically the other side of utopia, which is considered, great for everybody. And dystopia is not great. But the leader of this group managed to capture all the oil, and what he didn't capture, he destroyed. So he had an iron fist on energy and used that to control make other nations bow down and do the service. And the structure of the novel involves a female president, and takes place in the year 2017, 2057, sorry, 2057. And she has plans to try and combat this evil dictator. Jason Beck is his name. And a New York City police detective from a diminished police department, because New York City itself is fractured into 15 neighborhoods. And so the story takes off from there. A dictatorship and a president. She's trying to fight this, and a New York detective vice president in the opening chapter is killed with four of the Secret Service agents. And he doesn't know basically what it is, but he's assigned to the case, and his police captain wants him to double check on the president. So that's where we are. We have a fractured Manhattan, a fractured basically world under the thumb of a dictator.
And that book is Sundown, correct? Sundown,
Yeah.
Engineering Gives the Devil a Sunburn.
Yeah, Sundown, yeah. I eventually reissued it. The cover, everything's the same, just the cover doesn't have engineering gave the devil a sunburn, because some people were confused by it. And actually one review, I don't think he read it, but gave 2 stars out of 5 and said the devil doesn't get a sunburn, he is a sunburn. So whatever.
Well,
So I figured no sense keeping that as a subtitle.
no, my first book is called Pilot's Cross. It's a mystery, and the subtitle was "Washing Your Hands of Murder Isn't Easy," and I thought that was very funny. Pilot, washing your hands of things. People didn't get it. They thought it was an exercise book, first of all, because they misread pilot for Pilates, and then the whole washing the hands thing. Most people just didn't seem to get it, and but I thought it was the most hilarious thing I'd ever written. Probably sound familiar to you?
Yeah, well, I had dreamed that up because the president, Lenora Allison is the character's name. She decides to fight back Jason Beck's control of all the oil and therefore the energy with using a 30-year-old Japanese satellite, and to beam down sun energy onto a rectangular grid built over Manhattan. And that was her plan. She's going to use the sun. So I figured, oh, hey, the sun's going to burn the devil.
I totally love that. I like that. I like the entendre and the funny. It's just funny to me and amusing. And I like that. It shows that you have a sense of humor about things, which I like to read, particularly when I'm reading some dystopian stuff, because if it's all, and I love Cormac McCarthy, but if it's all the road and it's all depressing and dark the whole time, it's no fun to read. It's just terrible to read. So I like that. It sounds to me like you definitely have some humor mixed in here and some liveliness.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and the world that you encounter basically is controlled by this, the World Council, they call themselves, but it's not totally dark. It shows how you can fight against this and what have you, and it ends on a positive note. At least the first one does, with Jason Beck, the evil dictator, definitely under control in a sanitarium in New York, upstate New York, supposedly mentally deranged. Keyword supposedly.
Supposedly, yeah.
The second book picks up, and this is where I was a little bit spooky. I started writing that in 2016, the second book, Friendship City Hanging by a Thread. Again, 2016, I laid it out, or had it laid out already, started writing it, and it involves the remnants of this dictatorship struggling to gain control, and they do that by introducing a plague into the city, and the two characters, President Lenora Allison and the detective Nick Garvey, they have to combat this again and try and prevent the release of a deadly plague. I got kind of, as we entered into the pandemic here in 2020, basically I had finished the book and sent it off to a published author that I've dealt with that runs a critique and editing service. and it was in his hands when the pandemic struck. Uh, and so, but basically, that book came out last month, August sometime. There was back and forth. I guess my publisher had been hacked and couldn't, didn't know exactly when it was going to come out. And so I've laid out the plans for book number 3 and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it doesn't happen because the final resort is going to be this dictatorship attacking the financial well-being of not only this country but the world, making money worthless, and
Oh, wow.
so I hope that doesn't work. I keep my fingers crossed.
Yeah, so that we're going to go from Sundown to Friendship City, and then, as you say, this upcoming third book.
Yeah.
Okay, and it is a little spooky. It's a little eerie that you have had your finger on the what actually seems to be happening, or at least at the very least, it's very, very coincidental. A lot of these things.
Yes, I would say hopefully it coincidental.
Yeah. Well, what could be America, in your estimation? What could America be like in a few decades if we continue this course we're on? We are a very divided nation socially, culturally right now.
Yeah.
Where do you see it going?
I think eventually people are going to have to understand that you can have different viewpoints. You can debate, maybe even argue, as long as you're not throwing bricks at each other, and which seems to be one of the norms here. Either the bricks are thrown, or get out of the house, get out of this business. You can't uh, exist with me. Basically, I think we used to have an environment where you could debate, argue, and at least shake hands.
Right.
My wife and we've been married 58 years. And, I think like all couples, we have our debates, our differences of opinion, but when we air them, we give a hug. And okay, so if I'm talking with someone else, maybe I don't hug them, but I should be willing to listen to their point of view, give them my point of view, and shake hands. I hope that's where we're going. Uh, I I think that there seems to be a lot of concentration on educating young people to a certain point of view.
Yeah.
And I do feel that is uh, setting up the stage that they will not question uh, a certain point of view. And all points of view my point of view should be questioned and debated. But it looks like they're trying to set up an environment that points of view, this is the right way that life is, and don't question it. And if you do question it, the doors are closed.
I've been very disturbed by, as a man in his late middle age with a teenage daughter. I've been very disturbed to see that what I've been very disturbed to see that there is actually, it appears to me, Carl, and I may be wrong, but it appears to me there is a chunk of our society, at least a quarter of it, at least, maybe more, that really doesn't seem to actually believe in democracy. They seem to really believe in autocracy. They're very much into the cult of personality. They're very much into, as you said, people who would rather pick up a brick than argue a point. And now I'm not so ignorant of history as to know that actually in the late 30s, prior to our entry into World War II, there was a strong American Nazi movement, and even Lindbergh was a fan of this, as I recall. So you tell me, if you don't mind, based on that point, we kind of came to our senses because we had to, because of World War II. And I'm getting to a point here, I promise. But I thought this is the naivete I had. I thought when 2020 hit and the virus hit, I thought pardon the pun, but the fever will break. This is a common enemy. We will all
Mhm.
fight it together. No such luck. I mean,
No.
it was weaponized as a political
Mhm.
talking point.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Yeah, that amazed me too. The expectation was, hey, we're in this together, and let's help each other. You know, and I, 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 I don't know. I look now, and you see in the last 2 to 5 years, concentration on, uh, I guess, is the word being used is indoctrinating young people. I guess it's been going on for years, but uh, we have a younger person in our family, grandchild that is uh, very smart but very liberal, and so we usually will discuss things, but over the table or something like that. But when this person's around, let's tread lightly. Let's talk about
Right.
other things.
Right.
But my point of view is uh, when that person gets older and has to interact with the world, earn and provide and what have you, maybe they'll see that it doesn't all come uh, from the government or what have you.
Right.
Not that I'm distrustful of the government, but the government has their place, and please stay there.
Right. And I understand that, but from my perspective, though, there seems to be one side right now that's interested in democracy and another side that is not. But I also understand as a young person, your passions are different, and it's very all left or all right. And as I got to my stage of life now, I'm very moderate person, and I see that a lot. I think there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Although I was told by a young person recently that I've lost my spirit. I've lost this.
Mm.
I'm like, no, I'm practical. I'm pragmatic. I want society to work. We're not all going to be the same way. So
No.
look, can we not meet in the middle here and not go to the extremes and end up killing each other? That's my thought.
Yeah. I and I was, let's see, I was born in 1938. I'm 83 now, and you know, uh, I remember, around 1943 or 44, a young toddler, and I mentioned to my mother, I said, "Gee, I'm so happy to be alive when President Roosevelt is running the country." Well, she's been a lifelong Republican. She said, well, but she never said he's evil or anything like that. And looking back on it, I don't agree with, now that I'm 83, everything he did, but he did, he pulled the country together. And if he'd been president in the last 10 years, he'd have been vilified. I think each president uh, going on has been and probably will be, hopefully for a short time, vilified. And different countries and what people have their problems, and they got to try and figure out how to negotiate them. And my yelling at them and calling them an idiot is not going to help them.
It's very true. Well, let's move forward here too. I'm fascinated by two things about your book here. That one, and this took me, and we don't need to give away why or anything, okay? But it would be more likely, I would think, that as an author, you would kill off the president, and then the female vice president is elevated, right? But you didn't, right? You killed the vice president. She was already president, or do I have that backwards?
Yeah, I didn't go. I had laid out starting in 2010. You know, I think, as I had, I that's way in my mental history now, but she had filled the second half of a previous president who died. So she was the vice president. But the story opens. The first book opens. She's the president. So I don't go into much history. So to me, how she got there wasn't critical to the storyline. but her vice president in the storyline, was killed with for a Secret Service. He's a male, and it didn't really do too much. But he was killed uh, by this World Council to show the president that they can do what they want. And, it was already, I guess, known by the dictator that she was going to try and do this beaming down energy and cut off his revenue and his power. Um, and to me, again, it was before any, again, I laid this out in 2010, long before any female president or vice president. Yeah, I guess I, I was born in 1938. My parents divorced after 2 years. I'm born in California. My mother, we went to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and that's where I grew up. Went to, parochial or Catholic grade school, but I was always impressed. My mother got a job as a secretary to an executive at Nash Motors in Milwaukee, and I just grew up saying, "Gee, my mother is a very competent person and confident of her skills." And years later, when I went, to college in New Jersey, engineering school, I met my future wife, who struck me as very competent. And well, she was the president of her sorority. We met at a party. But for 58 years, I've always been in, I say women have been, I look to, confident women, and that's maybe what I put into the story with this, the president, Lenora Allison, competent. She's able to deal with problems. In the second book, I had it. My editor said, you got to give me some background on, on the president. And so I did. I worked in a short scene.
Well, I love how you're so prescient too. The way you keep figuring these things out a decade at a time. So I'm going to ask you this now. What are you prognosticating for us? You did kind of hint at this earlier about your third book, and you hope it doesn't come to pass. But just looking forward, as someone who has a vast life experience and wisdom, and as a writer, as a fiction writer, what do you see coming up that you think could potentially happen in the next decade or so?
I think there'll be financial concerns. I mean, people want to have the government give them anything. Well, who's paying for it is the question. Well, they'll say the rich people. The rich people can afford financial advisors how to how to get away with, avoid problems. Whereas, myself, I'm, I guess I would say most of I've been middle class. So I've been fortunate. That my first fortunate event was being born in this country, and but I had a college education. My mother worked hard to provide it, and we worked to help provide for our kids, and we assisted with the grandkids too, and but. I think a lot of that, we had to do it. In the second book, I have an appendix where I asked, there was the Friendship City is a combination of Matamoros, Mexico, and Brownsville, Texas. They've been attacked by this World Council. They petition their governments, let us become autonomous. It's granted. They come up with a Bill of Rights with obligations. That's in the back of the book. And I came up with 10, and I asked people, via a newsletter and what have you, if they would contribute. So there's 18 more, I think, 18 more Bill of Rights suggestions And so I'm going to be in the third book. It's going to start off, I feel, with this city and the Bill of Rights, and I'll be asking for more. But I want people, there are things in your life that require you to do something, you to contribute, not just the government. You don't sit back in a chair and say, give me this, give me that. Uh, that's, and if you do that, then the government, you know, they run out of money. When you look at Venezuela, that used to be the strongest, most economically viable country in South America. Now it's not. It's it went from a capitalistic utopia, maybe, and people will say those two never agree, but it's dystopia. Now it's not, before we had the when the pandemic started here, I remember, and I heard several people mention that we went to our supermarket and you look down the aisle and you see the toilet paper aisle and stuff empty. There was no toilet paper. And I heard several people mention, oh, this is like Venezuela. And guess what? If you don't assume some responsibility in your life to do something, the government is all it's going to do is fail you the long term.
Right. And I don't know if I 100% agree with that, but I do agree with one thing. The more you take from the government in that regard, the more leverage the government has over you. So that would be my concern mostly. I do believe in a safety net. And I love that we can talk about this and we're not throwing rocks at each other. This is great, Carl. Just like you said earlier. But I believe in a safety net, but I'm with you that you can't just take it all from the government because there are limits. But I'm fascinated by the parallel you draw to Venezuela and then the toilet paper shortage too. It's oh my gosh, it's crazy. Well, as we're getting ready to wrap up here, I got to ask you something. So do you think, I mean, back in the 90s and early aughts, there was a really popular, I mean, super popular TV show called The X-Files that was all about conspiracy and about distrust of the government, trust no one. And it kind of reflected, some people I've read has said that it reflected a zeitgeist where basically people were bored and looking for something to distract them, and conspiracy and stuff like that. It was exciting and fun. So if that, let's just assume for the sake of argument that is a pretty realistic thing. Okay. That maybe that really was the case why a show like that was popular. Okay. A very out there show. So how would you draw a line towards dystopian fiction being so popular right now? Like you have all the zombie shows and you have books like yours and stories. What does that say about us now?
Well, I think there's always a group, and I can understand that they like fantasy or with horror mixed into it. And basically, I'm looking into I guess if I had to call my books, I'd something a futuristic thriller, I guess.
Yeah.
But there's problems. There's things that if you don't do something, the zombies and vampires, I think they've been in fiction for a long time and probably will be. And I following them and is not to my taste, but it's a taste. I'm not into romance novels, but hey, 58 years I've had a romance with my wife.
You have, yeah.
And so I think it's a personal taste. The zombies and stuff like that, they're in commercials now and they're redoing them. And but I think, and I agree with you, there has to be a safety net. And I think we're just maybe broadening it out too much.
Gotcha.
But
and I can see that, certainly. Well, I think my point too is there's a certain nihilistic pattern to dystopic stuff, isn't there? But I think you would argue here. I'm going to make your argument for you because I've already heard you say this. You hope there's going to be, and there was kind of happy endings here in a lot of this stuff. It's not always going to be. I hear from you that there is optimism in your work, though. It's not a completely nihilistic, everything's gone to hell, forget it, right?
No, and the detective Nick Garvey, he has a daughter and a granddaughter, and there's problems in the family with that, and he has to work that out and negotiate different attitudes and what have you. So it's to me, I know how the book is roughly going to end. I haven't written the third one, but it's going to end. People assume responsibility and work together.
Yeah.
There'll always be differences of opinion. That's
right.
If everybody thought the same, if everybody thinks the way I do, I got a problem too.
Yeah, me too. Okay, Mr. Mitchell, Carl H. Mitchell, if people want to buy your work, and we're talking about Sundown, Friendship City, Sundown, and the third book coming soon, where do you have them? Where are you selling them?
Well, let's see. They're on Amazon. They're on Apple's iBook. They're I guess Kobo, Barnes and Noble, and basically you go in. I guess what I do if I want to see how they're doing, I type in my name, Carl, Carl, space H space Mitchell, with Mitchell with 2 L's because my parents were generous. But that will, on Apple iBooks or Amazon or Barnes and Noble, that'll take you to actually the 2 books, and they're available. They went when I did the first book, I sent it out to I think over 50 different agents, and maybe a third of them responded. No. But I stumbled into, I guess, in checking websites, a book, Covenant Books, and they said, maybe we'll be interested. We don't want a book that's got explicit sex, gratuitous violence, or anti-Christian values. And I said, well, there's no explicit sex in the book. There's not even non-explicit sex. There's no gratuitous violence. There is violence, but it's plot driven.
Right.
And I said it's not anti-Christian. I said there's 2 nuns in the story, and I didn't tell them that they got shot after 2 chapters. But the 2 nuns had dinner and debating with a neighbor who was atheistic, what have you. And so they work together.
Well,
so
this is okay. Well, this is great. And we will have links in the show notes, but I will also link to your excellent website. And everybody, you should go visit Carl H. Mitchell, and that is with the C and then Mitchell with 2 L's at the end.com, carlhmitchell.com. And he has links there. We'll have links in your show notes that'll be available at mgopod.com. But we also have a promo video I believe for Sundown. Isn't that right? In there, and some synopsis.
Yeah, and I have to update the website to put the new book in. It's been hectic the last few weeks.
It never ends though, right? I mean, there's always updating to do. I understand that. Yeah. Carl H. Mitchell, I really enjoyed speaking with you about your books. I'm looking forward to checking them out. And we just hope you'll come back when your third book's ready, and we'll talk some more here on Mysterious Goings On.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. And if the door's open, I'll definitely be looking to come back in.
Very good. I love podcasting. I have since 2006, back when you had to use like a Dixie cup with string to make the thing work. And that's why I'm so excited that we recently moved Mysterious Goings On to Anchor FM to record our podcast. I got to tell you, I don't regret it a bit. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. I'm not going to lie to you, when I first heard about Anchor, I was a little dubious because I've been doing it the hard way for so long. But I got to tell you, it's very easy. Use a Stripe account. Get sponsors. You're not paying monthly hosting fees. The sound quality is great. The distribution is phenomenal. Friends, download the free Anchor app today if you want to start your own podcast, or go to anchor.fm to get started. Remember, you heard it here first on Mysterious Goings On. Thanks so much for listening to Mysterious Goings On. Don't forget, we have a complete archive of all of our interviews, monologues, updates, live readings, dead readings. All of that stuff is available at mgopod.com. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to us so you never miss an episode. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the usual suspects. Please join us there. Again, don't forget, mgopod.com also has links where to find me on social media and how to get in touch in case you want to be a guest here on the show. Well, I think it's time that I move on for this week, but until next time, keep reading.